I'm so pleased to see everybody joining us in person, and also those of you who are joining us virtually, thank you for being here. We are the place, the Economic Club, the place to be challenged by leading speakers and advance great ideas collectively, and we're glad you're all part of it. My name is Kathy Langham. I am President and CEO of Langham Logistics. I'm also very honored to serve as President of the Economic Club this year. So if you haven't already, please scan the QR code at your seat and check in for us. That way we can have a good count of everyone that's here and keep you in the loop on what's going on too. Before I introduce the President's Table, I'd like to take a moment and thank this year's presenting sponsor, One America. Please join me in a round of applause for them. We also have a lot of platinum sponsors up here. And just so you know, the banners outlined in gold are folks that have been supporting us for over 10 years. Thank you for your support. Let's expand today's conversation through social media. So please get out your phones and post or tweet or like us so all your friends and associates will know you're at the Economic Club today. Our Twitter handle is @EconomicClubIN, and it's at your table. Dave Ricks is Chair and Chief Executive Officer of Eli Lilly and Company, a Lilly veteran for more than 25 years with experience in marketing, sales, drug development, and international operations. Dave became CEO in January of 2017 and then chairman of the Lilly board a few months later. He also spoke to this group 5 years ago, so it'll be interesting to hear what's changed since he started. Dave served as president of Lilly Bio-Medicines for 2012 through 2016. He led the company's largest affiliate, Lilly USA, as president from 2009 to 2012. Prior to that, Dave served in international leadership roles for nearly 8 years, including president and general manager of Lilly China. He led Canada after roles as director of pharmaceutical marketing and national sales director in that country. Dave joined Lilly in 1996 as a business development associate and held several management roles in US marketing and sales before moving to Lilly Canada. Dave earned a Bachelor of Science degree from Purdue and an MBA from Indiana. Dave is on the board of Adobe and is the immediate past chair of the board of the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America. Dave is a member of the International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers, the Business Council, and I had to look that one up. So that is an association of CEOs of the world's most important business enterprises, a very big deal. He is also on the Business Roundtable and the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office's Council for Inclusive Innovation. Closer to home, Dave is also an amazing leader here. He serves on the board of Central Indiana Corporate Partnership and on Riley Children's Foundation Board of Governors. Please join me in welcoming Dave Ricks to our stage.
Thank you, Kathy. Whenever I hear that long form bio, I find myself with two emotions. One, I feel busy. Two, I wish my family were here so they understood what I actually do. They probably wouldn't believe it. It's great to be with you here again. As Kathy said, it's been 5 years since I spoke at the Economic Club. I was concerned no one would show up, so I want to thank you first for arriving today and hope you enjoyed the lunch. And thanks to our sponsors and to you, Kathy, for chairing this year's program. It's always a highlight, I think, on the calendar to hear from our local but also non-local speakers at this event. 5 years ago, I came because I was the new CEO at Lilly, and I know, as you heard from my bio, a lot of people didn't know me in town. And of course, the person in this chair has played a big role in the city for a long time. So in many ways, was introducing myself to the business community locally, but also maybe to reassure the group. My predecessor, John Lechleiter, John had led the company through a very challenging period and really made two simple but powerful bets that I think are good lessons for anyone in the business community. He bet on his team, and he bet on the core of the company, which was science and innovation. So I came here to reassure people that I agreed with those things. And while the ship had been righted, we actually saw a period ahead that could be incredibly exciting for the company. And our job was to find another gear. And what I said at the time was we were going to do three things. We were going to focus even further. We were going to go even harder at science and innovation. And we also were going to bet on our people, but also bet on creating a higher performing organization through tighter execution. And that's what we've done. And I'm here today to proudly talk about the work of all my colleagues at the company. I think we've achieved a lot in five years. Some of those highlights are on this slide. As a company, one of our key metrics is how many patients we reach with innovative medicines around the world. And this number has grown by more than 10 million patients in the last 5 years to 47 million people globally. Of course, we also have an obligation to our investors to provide a fair return on what we do. And here, Lilly's had a very strong performance with our investors. Stock's up 336% in 5 years, which is leading the sector, actually, during that period of time. And importantly, our innovation engine is strong. We produce 16 new, never before seen medicines from our labs and introduce those to the world during this period of time. We set a goal to have 20 in 10 years, and we're well on pace to achieve that. And then, investing in the future is core. Companies get into trouble in our business when they don't sort of recapitalize the company by constantly investing in R&D. We've spent nearly $25 billion in R&D in the last 5 years, and much of that here in Indianapolis. So we're incredibly proud of these results. I think the company is in good shape as we stand here today. And on top of that, I think we see even brighter days ahead. We're not done yet. So here's a picture of something I'm particularly proud of as well, which is our efforts around COVID. And one of the ways we're going to get even better is be reminding ourselves and everyone we serve about what our purpose is, which is to make new medicines to overcome challenging human diseases. Sometimes those diseases are quite private, and in this case it was quite public, the COVID pandemic. On the left are some of our folks delivering the very first shipments for clinical trial purposes of a product that's complicated to say, but I'll do it anyway, bamlanivimab, which was the first ever drug created bespoke from scratch for COVID. That's amazing by itself. What's even more amazing is this picture was taken 90 days after we decided to work on this. And if you know anything about the drug discovery business, we don't measure things in days, we don't measure them in months, we typically measure them in years. So this broke every record possible, maybe will never be broken again at our company or any other. Really an amazing period of time. Thank you. Also on the upper right, you see our efforts on testing. We're not a testing company. We're not a healthcare company. We don't deliver services. But clearly early days in March and April and May here in the state of Indiana, there were significant deficits in the public health infrastructure, in our ability to run this fancy test we had to use for COVID called PCR. And Lilly created from scratch, had registered at the FDA, and then ran, at one point, more than half the tests in the state out of our corporate headquarters, starting with first responders and those on the front lines of healthcare. Super proud of the team on this as well. And if nothing else, we don't aim to be a diagnostics company, but it shows what we can do when I put our minds to it. We do science, and our scientists really delivered here, and then so many volunteers came to help administer those tests. And overall, just leading in the pandemic amongst the business community, many of you here in the room, trying to create clarity where we could to navigate those turbulent times. And maybe the question now is, well, what's next? Are we still in this period? And I'm personally adjusting to the post-COVID world. I hope you are as well. We're here maskless in a room full of people having lunch, and that feels pretty normal and good. But this world will be different, not only because of geopolitical challenges we all face, and maybe we can touch on in the Q&A, but also because I think the basis of competition will be different. Our business, we were able to go fast, but so were other actors. We need to go even faster. We bet on science to build the company this far. Science has never been more promising. And I think for all of us who got an mRNA shot in our arm, we experienced a new era of science, which is the area of genetic medicine or nucleic acid medicines. Here, Lilly's investing heavily as well. And then just to remind ourselves of our purpose, that human suffering is, unfortunately, it goes way beyond COVID-19. And there are many, many conditions we can make a meaningful difference in. The big ones we're working on now, like Alzheimer's and obesity, making cancer a chronic disease, I think we could all agree are worthy pursuits. And if we do well there, we'll have a great business for a long time. And that's our aim. So I stand today proud of the accomplishments, but also excited for the future. But I wanted to point out something else today, since we have the business community in the room, and that really relates to the community we operate within. And I think it's long been said that, when Lilly does well, Indiana's going to do pretty well. But I want to point out as well that the reverse is also true. When Indiana is thriving, Lilly can also thrive. And without those preconditions, we're going to struggle. So the rest of this talk is a little bit about our community. And thinking about this next decade, the post-COVID world, how could we win? I think for a long time, this state is focused on attracting businesses and jobs, primarily through economic means alone. And this is the economic club, so you probably appreciate that. But just pointing out here that there's some converging trends that make the economy much more intertwined with things we might think of as daily life. The health of our citizens, and the education level of our citizens in what will increasingly be an economy driven by ideas, not just by putting things together. And underpinning both those are two mega trends that perhaps you believe in, preserving our planet and creating inclusion for everyone. But even if you don't, I'd point out they are becoming necessary precursors to growing any economy. Both because having sustainability in our business and cost competitiveness in our energy economy is key, but also we're at 2.7% unemployment in this state, and probably every business in this room has open jobs. Inclusion is about bringing more people into the success story, and I think it's a mandate for all of us as well. So how are we doing on these dimensions? I found this study interesting out of CNBC lately, looking at benchmarking all 50 states. And I sort of sorted this by assets and liabilities of the state. We do well on those traditional factors. Infrastructure, cost of doing business, cost of living is low, business friendly, permitting and so forth works pretty well. This is the traditional agenda of our government groups, and I think they've executed well. But our liabilities are all the new things. Our education attainment in the state is not good. The ability to reskill the workforce, I think, could improve. Health, life, and inclusion overall, I think conditions rank poorly nationally in our state. And then workforce preparedness, also related to reskilling, is a liability for us. And digging into these data a little bit more, I think it's important all of you understand this, the need to focus on this as part of a policy agenda. Hoosiers today have relatively low performance on national metrics of education, whether it be proficiency in math, 37%, passed our own test on math proficiency. I think that's a very difficult statistic to look at. And if you look at what our economy is based on, when we talk about STEM, it's a manufacturing economy, but it's projected that about 30% of the current jobs will be lost in the next decade, replaced by math and science heavy positions. That's our business too. We hope to be part of that growth story, but we need to do some work to get our people in our state ready for this. And then high school and bachelor attainment, you can see as well, which is another marker for the success of our state. Another topic, which I applaud the governor and others, Speaker in the House, et cetera, for raising, is really a hidden business cost that of course also affects the livelihood and health of our people, and that is the cost of treatment for healthcare in our state, which is by many measures one of the worst in the country and certainly the worst in the Midwest. Here you have the relative price, and this is volume adjusted for healthcare versus our neighboring states. You can see we're by far the highest. And again, this is volume adjusted. Who bears this cost? This is the business cost. This is commercial insurance. The government sets fixed rates. That's what this is indexed towards. So we can lower the corporate tax rate a little bit more. It's already pretty low. But this is who funds this? Companies fund this. And we need to address this to attract more industry to our neighborhood here. Not only do we have higher rates, but we also have more volume. I think one concerning set of statistics is on this slide, which is chronic illness in our state is really worse than national averages on every metric. And so not only do we pay more for utilization of the healthcare system, we use it more because our populace is less healthy. This needs to be addressed as well. And here in the business community, we can make a difference through our corporate health programs, not just the healthcare we pay for with insurance, but how we keep our population healthy. And this also directly relates to absenteeism, which is a growing issue and one that's harder to manage when you have openings and you can't cover those shifts with other workers. And final comment on health, there's another bigger topic, which is public health. And here again, I think we rate relatively poorly. Total spending is last in Indiana amongst the 50 states. And other factors that can affect public health, like air quality and others, quality of movement and neighborhoods, we don't rank very highly on either. This can also loop back into that sustainability and green energy topic as well. So work to do. And if I had to make a list for the upcoming legislature, this would be it, to work on these things, to work on K through 12 education, the basic building blocks of how we prepare a workforce for the future. Reskilling, those that have already left that system but may struggle to find a new role in a modern economy. Public health is a precursor to health, and it's important we change, I think, our position on that ranking list from last to something north of that, and addressing the root cause of excessive costs for business to hiring new workers, which is healthcare costs. And as I said, precursor to success for the state is a green agenda. Whether you agree with that or not, it doesn't matter, it's happening. And if we cannot offer energy that has a sustainability mix to it, we won't land the next big employer here in the state. And of course, we need to include everyone. People's minds gravitate toward underrepresented groups. This is important. Certainly outcomes on all these dimensions for Black and brown communities in Indiana are worse, and we should do something to affect that. And one of the primary things businesses can do is offer good employment. But it goes beyond that. I think here in central Indiana, we are 50% of the economy, but only a third of the population, which means the other 50% of the economy is 2/3 of the population and are really being left out of the growth story in our state. That's rural Indiana. And then another group, which we can turn our minds to with the Ukraine crisis and others, are the people who don't live here yet but should, and those are immigrants, which have been the lifeblood of growth in Indiana. And we need to think about that as well because our population replacement rate is less than 2. So send this to the State House and maybe we can work on it together. That's one way. But I also want to point out that one of the special things, the things I really love about this state, is when we work on things together, whether it be in the business community, nonprofit, and with policymakers, we get things done. We built a sports economy here because of that. A smaller example, but a recent one I was involved with, was the infant mortality initiative through Riley Children's Hospital, nonprofits, and the governor. We really have moved the needle on that in a very significant way in a very short period of time, from being very low ranked on infant mortality to moving up the charts and being on track to be the best in the Midwest within 5 years. We can do these things, but we have to do them together. So an ask for attending this lunch is to work with us, to echo these messages, to make our state vibrant for the future, to win the post-COVID decade. And it's not just about lowering the corporate tax rate. Thanks for listening today, and look forward to the Q&A with Kathy.
Thanks for all the information. It's really, really good. I just want to remind everybody that you've got the cards, the blank cards on your table, so let us know if you have any questions or tweet the questions and they'll come up to us. So my first question is probably a simple one, but Humalog, Jardiance, Trulicity, Taltz, Cymbalta, Cialis, Zyprexa. Where do you come up with these names?
Household names. Household names. Well, I get that question a lot, mostly when I go to Thanksgiving at my relatives' houses, and they're very confused. You know, we're a regulated industry. So unlike a lot of other sectors where we can come up with a flashy name that actually conveys the benefit of the product, that's actually prohibited in our industry. So we have to choose names that don't convey the benefit of the product.
Wow.
Interestingly. We also have to choose names that aren't words. To avoid prescribing errors, we also have to choose names that haven't been used before. And we're kind of running out of letters, as you can point out from this. But there are experts who advise us. We catalog a series of options every time we have a new product, and we try to pick one that will be easy to say and has as few syllables and consonants as possible. But it's getting harder and harder.
Yeah, okay. I didn't even want to try to pronounce the new diabetes drug that is...
Tirzepatide? Yeah, but that's, so we always have a generic name and then a trade name. So that one will have a trade name very soon, hopefully when it gets approved in the next few months.
Terrific. And congrats. I know you've got a great pipeline, and this Alzheimer drug, we all want the Alzheimer drug as fast as we can. So sounds like the clinical trials are going well.
Yeah.
Can you give us an update?
Well, as I mentioned, I think we're working on some of the most important conditions mankind face. We made medicines for COVID. We're proud of that. But that's actually should be the second or third leading killer last year in the United States, which is interesting. Cancer and heart disease still are more dangerous, and they aren't going away. Like, that pandemic's not ending. So we need to work on those areas. We have big investments in both those areas. But an area relatively untreated, and the fifth or sixth leading cause of death, actually, people don't think of Alzheimer's as causing death, but it does. It's fatal in every case, is Alzheimer's disease. And we've been working in this area, doing research for 34 years, spent multiple $1 billion on this, mostly failing, but through the failures we've learned. That's how science advances. And we had the first ever positive study readout last year in Alzheimer's. We're replicating that, which is kind of the gold standard for proof. And hopefully this time next year, we'll have those results. And what an important way to make a difference in our work is to help people who have that condition.
Absolutely. We're all betting on it. Supply chain question. Over the last a couple of years, a lot has changed, and there's been a lot of congestion in the supply chain and supply chain shut down and a lot going on. How is pharma in general, and Lilly in particular, thinking about changes in the supply chain, whether it's raw materials or manufacturing, reshoring product? How are you thinking about that over the next couple of years?
Yeah, we're thinking a lot about it. I'm sure you are too in your business. I mean, things got complicated fast for many reasons. In healthcare, we make medicine, and one thing people don't fully appreciate is the impact that the surge in vaccine production had on other biologic production. My friend who runs Pfizer makes this comment that the world made 1 billion doses of vaccines in 2019. And in 2022, we'll make 18 billion. So that's an incredible expansion. And the volumes are way above other medicines. So that's consumed a lot of the input supplies that we often use for other biologic products. That's constrained us. Of course, the snarls in the logistics system affect us as well. Right now, acutely in China and Russia, getting our medicines to those markets, but even through those markets has been particularly challenging. And then long term, one of the things I think we should all be worried about is a probably slow, but a decoupling process with China. I think we have to plan for this because of geopolitical risk, which means we need redundancy. And we make most of our stuff in US and Europe, but the inputs to the inputs, not even the one step, but the two-step removed inputs, it's a lot of China. So we need to diversify that procurement process and source things from other places. It's certainly possible. Our key challenge is we're regulated. So every change in the product we have to prove is the same as the original. And sometimes these regulatory processes can take a decade. And so we need to start now planning for that uncertain future. The good news for a manufacturing destination like Indiana is that onshoring is a real thing. It's real in biopharmaceuticals. It's going to be real in semiconductors for sure, and other key inputs, batteries, things like this. And we're good at making things. So that's a part of the strategy for growing the economy that I think we should all embrace and the state should pursue aggressively.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're known as the manufacturing state and distribution, and this is a perfect opportunity to gear up for something like that.
Yeah, it's happening. It's going to happen.
Coming.
I think it's a matter of whether we can win that future.
Yeah. You mentioned Russia and the Ukraine. I know that you have stopped shipping exports of non-essential drugs to Russia and stopped investments and new clinical trials there, and are doing what you can to help Ukraine and the critical services that you provide in Russia that will continue. Even that, those profits will all go to the Ukraine. So thank you for doing that. I guess my question is, what is the impact of that on Russia, the Ukraine, and Lilly?
Yeah.
And then my follow-up is, are other pharma companies doing that too?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Obviously, it's a super tragic situation and needless conflict that we condemn. And so our actions need to follow our values. And with that, of course, immediately we acted to aid the Ukrainians who are under attack, and large parts of their economy, including the retail medicines dispensaries, kind of stopped working. So donating essential medicines we did very early on. It's not easy getting those to the front lines, actually, so that remains a challenge, working through nonprofits, but proud of our team's efforts there and our own employees' generosity. We raised about $250,000 just from people's own pockets to help folks in the Ukraine. And I read today something like 40% of our employees in Eastern Europe are actually housing refugees. So this is if you know anyone in Eastern Europe, I think that's probably not uncommon across people who have good jobs. But the impact of that on Poland and Czech Republic is pretty significant. And then on Russia, like a lot of industries, we of course have to think about how much we want to be supporting a government that's doing this, and we don't. Yeah. On the other hand, we have a little bit of a difference from other general industries. We're not making, potato chips. No offense to the potato chip people, but we make products that aren't substitutable, and people need to live. Yeah. So we want to serve the patients without serving the government. That's tricky because we're very regulated and the government has to endorse certain actions, but we've withdrawn promotion. We're committed to supply those essential medicines. And as you said, are donating our profits to humanitarian relief in the interim. This won't be a forever state because we can't operate that way forever. Mm-hmm. And it seems more likely to me than not that Russia will become much more like it was in 1989 than it is now through time. And so we're going to have to look to other models to serve those Russian patients, but perhaps without a Lilly presence at all is something on the board. So it's sad. It's 0.7% of our global revenue. It's not a financial issue for us, but a lot of people worked hard to build that business, and now we're withdrawing.
Right. Are other pharma companies doing this too?
Pretty much across the board. There's a few that haven't gone all the way there, but most have followed us. I read AbbVie, our neighbors to the north in Chicago, just announced this today even. So the list of those that aren't doing that is pretty small now.
Yeah, okay, great. So got a couple of questions here. And I think this next one, I was gonna ask you to explain to the group a little about the 110 program, but maybe this goes along with that. What anti-racist efforts have you engaged in as a corporation to help this community and state become more inclusive of Black and brown voices and perspectives? For example, how did you respond to the attacks on critical race theory?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, thanks for the question. It's an issue I think we've cared deeply about for a long time. Although I have to be honest, my thinking probably 5 years ago when I was speaking here is different than it is today. And that's an important shift. I used to think we need to be doing a good job as an employer. And that's the most important thing a business can do, both for those that work for us already, but importantly, making our company look like our community. And we set out to do that. I think we've made a lot of progress on diversity and inclusion efforts inside the company. I'm very proud of that. We're not done yet, but have made really remarkable steps in terms of representation in management and in our hiring practices, et cetera. But 2 years ago, that changed for me, and I think a lot of people. So the question became, well, how do we use Lilly's presence in our community here in Indiana to make a difference for those that will never work for us, and influence other businesses in doing so. So we've done two main things. One is we committed $25 million through our Foundation for Racial Justice Initiatives in the community, including in the education system, and are in the process of those grants now. We're not through that period. We also volunteered a lot of hours of our employees to those groups, which is important. And then the other thing we did is we got together with the Indy Chamber and CICP and other organizations and created this racial justice initiative amongst businesses that sought to do two things: change how we hire and share those practices so that opportunities were more available to members of the Black and brown communities. And by the way, it's also a business benefit because we can attract new talent sources.
Right.
And then also procurement. We've had longstanding initiatives in our company for minority procurement, but really being much more ambitious with that. And so we decided to triple our purchasing. We're well on track to do that through minority businesses, and then pledge as a community, other big businesses and small, to do the same. That can have I think a pretty profound trickle-down effect in terms of the economic disparities people experience. On the CRT. Thank you. Thank you. I didn't address the CRT question largely because the bill didn't pass here. So, not much to say. I'm personally pleased with that outcome.
Great, thank you. There's a constant battle, federally, locally, everything about drug prices. And I know it comes up all the time. People are thinking about it. So let's address the elephant in the room. So how does a company like Lilly balance trying to keep drug prices low, but still have a robust pipeline to help us with Alzheimer's and diabetes and all those things?
Yeah, so it's an important question and one I answer a lot. So a few things, just baseline. I mean, first of all, we have a pact with society, and the pact goes something like this: that we invest, our only business to invest in innovative medicines. And I think everybody, whether it be Alzheimer's or another condition with whether you or a loved one has, you want us to do that. We spend 25 cents of every dollar we sell back into R&D. That's more than SG&A, that's more than we pay in taxes. That's a lot of money going into R&D. For a cure, people today are using our medicines that they may not experience the benefit of, but someone else will. That's the business cycle we're in.
Right.
The return of that is we get a monopoly when we create something great and it gets approved, but when the monopoly ends, drugs become very, very cheap because the recipe via the patent system is shared with everyone, and the day the patent's over, everyone can copy it. This system works by and large pretty well. In the US, we have the cheapest generic medicines in the world because we have a very clear end to that patent cycle. Probably our most famous medicine is Prozac, and you can buy Prozac for about 3 cents a day in the United States, and it's still the most commonly used antidepressant. So the good of that invention lives well beyond our economic return period. That's the deal. So how does that get messed up? I think two important ways. One, we buy health insurance as individuals to help offset costs when we're sick. That's what insurance is, right? We all share that cost, and then if I'm a victim, I benefit. But somehow in the pharmacy part of healthcare, this has gotten really contorted. First of all, in pharmacy, you pay more out of pocket than any other service in healthcare. The average is 3 cents on the dollar for a hospital stay. It's 25 cents on the dollar for your branded medicine. Why are we biasing insurance against branded medicine when probably it's a good way to stay out of the hospital to begin with? I don't know. I don't run an insurance company, but that's how a lot of products are built. If you're an employer and you buy insurance, you should ask this question. Do you want your people on medicine or do you want them in the hospital? I think we've created an economic imbalance that's hard to explain. The second thing is we have companies in our industry that have sought to extend those patents and kind of break that pact. We've never done that to my knowledge. And I think there's good, well-intended legislation to address that point. So we need the out-of-pocket costs to come down, and we need that patent period to be more clear. I think those are the two big picture fixes. Overall, though, it's important to point out, healthcare, everything is expensive. Drugs are too. As a percent of our GDP, we'll approach 20% of our GDP is healthcare. That's probably too much for sustainability. But of that, only 12% is medicine. So 88% of all healthcare is not medicine. So we get a lot of the airtime on cost of healthcare. That's because people pay more out of pocket. But in fact, it's not the piece that's growing the fastest or even the majority.
How do you think about GoodRx and apps like that?
Great. I think digital health can create more transparency in filling your prescriptions. I mean, there's lots of consolidation in the system by which you get drugs that is not good for consumers. There's only a few brand name drugstores left. There's only a few so-called pharmacy benefit managers that employers in this room buy the services from. I think more competition would be great. We have tons of competition in our business.
Yeah.
It's the route to the consumer is pretty constrained.
It's that insurance and transparency that we could use a little work.
Big opportunities.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. For years, the biggest delays are in the phase 1 through 4 execution for clinical studies. Has this improved recently, and what does the future execution of clinical studies appear to be?
Yeah, great question. Clinical trials are painfully slow. That's true, although our team's done a great job of improving that. Last time I was here, we had shrunk the cycle time for Lilly from an industry average of 11 years to about 9.5, and we were proud of that advancement. I'm pleased to say that our average cycle time now is almost 7 years, and we're number 2 in the industry overall. So if there's one reason why our R&D is perceived as more productive and our stock price is high and we're launching more new medicines, this is probably the overriding reason, is cycle time. It's a simple business concept, but if you can just turn your work over faster, you can do better. 7 years still seems like a really long time. If you have an untreatable cancer, that's more than a lifetime probably. Yeah. So we need to go even faster, and there are opportunities to do that, and the team's really focused on that. It's a good business problem.
Yeah, that's great. Did COVID have anything to do with that, speeding up?
Yeah, we learned a ton from that.
Okay.
Some is not replicable because, first of all, viral pathogens, when they're really spiking, there's a lot of people getting very sick. It's easier and quicker to enroll and get results. We certainly don't want disease to get worse so we can speed up. That's not the goal here. But in that situation, it was true. We could put a lot of people in studies very rapidly. And so we got answers quickly. But we also experienced a lot of innovation from our team. Maybe one of the most unique one, because it's kind of a made in Indiana one, was we partnered with a mobile home manufacturer, an RV manufacturer, and just kitted out RVs as mobile clinical trial pharmacies, essentially. And we did this because we wanted to reach patients in nursing homes. We all know that like 40% of the US deaths were nursing home patients, and we wanted to protect them using our monoclonal antibodies. But it was hard to get them to go to a health facility for a traditional trial. So we brought the trial to them. We're now using this in the Alzheimer's trials you're talking about to reach underserved communities, particularly communities of color, as well as thinking about new ways to use this sort of mobile technology of direct-to-consumer studies. So people can sign up and participate without going through an academic medical center, which probably reduces costs and speeds things up as well. So that's a kind of innovation. The final thing that helped is regulatory flexibility, which is not the norm and probably will be shifted back to how it was before. But during COVID, of course, FDA and all the scientists there wanted to make a difference too, and they really worked very hard to help us get to market quickly.
Well, we hope it's sustainable and they will continue.
I think parts of it will be.
Yeah. That's great. Lilly is planning a $700 million investment in Boston and hiring 200 scientists to really look at RNA and developing more products. So Can you tell us about, and I know Lilly's in the middle of it, I think 20% of your products are
Preclinically, yeah.
genetic medicine, RNA. So can you talk more about where that is going and how we should think about that?
Yeah, it's super exciting. And I mean, who here in the room had an mRNA vaccine? I mean, probably everybody, right? So we've all taken one of these already. You may not even have known it. But in the history of medicine, we started by basically taking organic compounds, chemistry, from nature and turning those into medicines. And then we figured out how to make them in our labs, designed for disease. And that's still the backbone of the industry, which are oral pills you take for various conditions. That's still very important and getting more sophisticated too. About 40 years ago, Lilly launched the first biotechnology product on the planet called Humulin, human insulin, in partnership with Genentech. And that set off this biotech revolution. And those are important products now as well, not just insulin, but so-called monoclonal antibodies like the ones we made for COVID or even for autoimmune disease or cancers. The next wave are these nucleic acid therapies, which work upstream of that and interfere with how your body makes proteins, essentially. It's a pretty exciting area because you can be much more targeted, potential for less side effects, and very long acting, so more convenient for the patient. The epicenter of this is in Boston. That's why we put our site there. Some of you may be wondering why we didn't put it in Indianapolis. But the science, the people are there that do this. And so it was important to attract them for our efforts. And this has the promise to cure or prevent lifelong diseases that are very serious. We're studying in genetic medicine, gene therapy for conditions like Parkinson's and even more rare conditions, frontal temporal lobe dementia, for instance. And the most immediate applications will be in neurodegenerative conditions, as well as metabolic conditions like lipid management and other more common diseases, including forms of diabetes. So that's an exciting new field for us, and we're investing heavily in that space.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, you mentioned why not Indiana, and I know you're building a manufacturing plant in the Carolinas, and you've got some other investments around the country. We get it. I mean, in my business, I'm building warehouses around the country for a lot of good reasons. But then we're kind of jealous too as Hoosiers, and we want everything in Indiana. So how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, that sort of will bring us back to some of the points I was raising in the talk.
Yeah.
First of all, we do need to diversify our locations. That's important because we don't want to compete with ourselves for workforce, and we have to be closer to our customers. But it is also true the last 4 major expansions we announced, 2 in North Carolina, 1 in RTP and now 1 in Charlotte. In Limerick, Ireland, we're building a brand new big factory for monoclonal antibodies, and then the big new research site in Boston. You could ask, well, is there some trend forming here? And what the hell
Should
is
we be nervous?
Rick's doing, and why is he doing it? We have a Indiana first kind of approach to these things. We prefer a cluster and how we bring our folks together. It is important to diversify our geographies, but it's also important to learn as to why we're not the only ones putting these sites in these places, right? So workforce, background costs of healthcare, and sort of community quality are very important factors that go into this, in addition to the business-friendly traditional economic measures. I get calls from lots of policymakers in the state about each one of these right after they happen. And I give this speech I gave today, and I'm hopeful that we can organize some things. And if there's any good that came out of these announcements for Indiana, is we can adapt and be much more attractive. So it becomes impossible for Lilly not to put it here. That would be my goal. But we always start with Indiana on the list.
Right. Good to know. Well, and we want to, you put up a list of a lot of things that Indiana needs to work on. Absolutely. And then we've got this target of reshoring or onshoring back in the US. So I think we would be silly not to try to help any way we can to make that happen. So
yeah, huge opportunity. And at the same time, without adaptation, it won't be ours.
Yeah.
We need to adapt.
Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of, and it seems like, I guess this is an employee discussion as well as where pharma is going. It seems like a lot of people are leaving big companies and going to startups, and leaving big pharma and going to these biotechs. They're all over the place. I mean, there are hundreds in Indiana. So how do you think about that? How does that help with, or hurt with competition and employee retention? It is crazy right now.
Yeah, it's a real thing. I think it's always been there. And my perspective on this is, look, we want the best to come work at Lilly.
Yeah.
But if we can't offer them what they want, whatever that is, working on a different project or advancement, they should look somewhere else. You know, I think we want our people to thrive. Not everyone wants that. They can be happy at Lilly, and some people will advance or work on different projects, so it's okay. I think what's new, maybe embedded in your question, is this idea of location. So I think a newer trend is there are, several people who left at the beginning of the year who are working for a company based on one of the coasts and being promised they never have to move in Carmel and work for a Boston biotech. That sounds pretty good. You dig a little deeper and you say, well, is anyone else in that condition? No, everyone else works in Boston. No. Do you think that'll be a problem in being effective and getting your work done? Yeah, it worked pretty well during the pandemic. I think people are in that mood. We'll have to see how that can operate. I think in a small company, it's more probable than a bigger company, where a mix of personal time to get personal work done and coming together to get together work done is what's going to be kind of the steady state from here forward. So wish them well. It's good at Lilly people are attractive. We've done well. And some of that also is, when you're the New York Yankees and you win the World Series every year, people come take your players. That's happening to us too. So we have to be competitive with compensation, which is, going up rapidly, actually. And where we really can't find a fit for them and they're not going to be happy with us, wish them well as they advance to their next thing outside the company.
And are these biotech startups, do you have someone looking at those to say, should Lilly acquire them?
All the time.
All the time.
Every day. I started my career in that world, business development, and that's what they do. We have a whole department that looks at basically every company in our fields every day to say, is this technology interesting? Should we acquire it? Should we partner? Should we just watch it? That's a whole part of the R&D engine. And when I took this role, about less than 20% of our pipeline came from those sources. We're now over a third. And that's got to be a key to our growth, is continuing to be good, not just at inventing things at Lilly, but looking outside our labs and acquiring innovation no matter where it came from, and collaborating with the best people in the world to bring compelling medicines forward.
That's good advice for all of us.
Yeah, look
We're
outside.
all going through the same thing.
Yeah.
So Dave, you're running a $28 billion public company with plenty of risk. I had a chance to look at your 10K. The pandemic, government regulatory scrutiny on therapies, strain in global transportation and logistics, competition from generics, biosimilar, biotech, new product pipeline, global supply chain disruptions. And along with all that, you've been an extremely important voice in Indiana. And I have been involved in a few of those meetings, but you have been kind of the steady rudder for us over the last couple of years. How do you not just manage? This is a stress question. How do you not just manage?
I'm getting stressed out listening to this.
I know, I'm stressed out saying it. No, but how do you not just manage, but thrive in all this?
Yeah, good question. Jeez. I've had different forms of this, but you really cataloged it all there, didn't you? I try to think of like things my mom said to me in like third grade. So first of all, don't take yourself too seriously. I think when people overemphasize your own impact, you can get pretty spun up in your own head about this. Just do the next thing, right? Just focus on what's in front of you. And, if you're worried about the next shot, you're going to miss the ball this time. So just hit this one and then worry about that next. And then, I think rely on those around you. We have an amazing talent at our company. And every day I'm surprised when I ask someone to help us something that we actually have some expert in the world somewhere, someone I never knew, that can help solve a problem. So I think when you're a leader and you put it all on yourself and you kind of overestimate your importance and you think too many steps down the line, you can be pretty stressed out. I try not to do those things.
Yeah.
And then to help me keep my feet grounded, I just go home. I have a teenage son at home and a wife who doesn't really care what I do. So
it's very good advice for all of us, because it's been a crazy couple of years. So thanks for taking the time to speak with us.
It's been great. Thank you.
Today's presentation will be available online at economicclubofindiana.com. Please join us for next month's finale on Tuesday, May 3rd, to hear from Roger Penske and Mark Miles. Information and tickets are available on the website. Dave, thank you again, and everyone have a great afternoon.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.